Your true self versus your strategic self. 4 archetypes for navigating the world and 14 words to live by. Recently, I was in the middle of a rare 12-day stretch of being away from home, and I wrote the original issue that I'm recording right now from my hotel room while I was away. Now, today's episode is going to be a bit different. This episode is going to be a bit more personal than normal. And so if you want to come back and hear what I have to say about AI and business and the future of humanity in next week's episode, I will not be offended. And if you're new to the Digital Contrarian and you've just subscribed, you may want to first read recent issues that I've written on topics like the top 10 business frameworks from issue 44, or the 3-part RTR AI business model opportunity from issue 67, or the first $1 trillion thought leader from issue 74. By the way, we'll make sure to link to each of these along with this episode. Or you could pick an issue that piques your interest from the archives, which you can get access to when you subscribe for free at thedigitalcontrarian.com. This will give you a sense for what to more typically expect in each week from me. But this week, I felt compelled to share something that hit me hard during my time away from home, and something that might just hit hard for you too. So, without further delay, let's dive in. A question to begin all questions. Let me begin by asking you something. Are you ever hard on yourself? Like, do you ever experience negative self-talk? Maybe that you're feeling behind, or that you feel like you're not doing enough, or that you're not good enough in your business, for your family, or for your partner. Or maybe that you feel like you're not living up to your potential. I'll come back to my reason for asking this in just a moment. But first, a bit of context. Now, the reason why I was traveling recently is because, as crazy as it sounds, I was invited to speak at 5 back-to-back events over a 2-week stretch that all happened to be held in Austin, Texas. And this past week, I spent most of the week at the first of these events, Front Row Dads Live. In fact, the photo of me speaking on stage here is from this event. Now, in case you're wondering, Front Row Dads Live, aka FRDL, is an annual event where over 150 fathers gather from around the world to work on themselves to become better dads, better leaders, and better men. And at these events, we laugh, we cry, and most importantly, we crack open our souls, which leads me to share with you here today something I did as a dad that I'm not proud of in the days leading up to the event. Shortly before leaving for this trip, I did something as a dad that I am not proud of. Something that is decidedly not consistent with how I want to show up as a father and as a man in this world. After a cascading series of events, I reached the boiling point of frustration with my younger son. And I screamed words at him that I now wish I could take back. Stop being so effing lazy. Lazy people are losers. Yeah, I know. Hurtful, harsh. Now, of course, with space and reflection, those are words I would never, ever want to utter to anyone, let alone my own son. But in a dysregulated state, feeling exasperated after what had been a difficult day, at the end of a difficult week, after what had amounted to be a difficult last few months, those hurtful words came out of my mouth. And my beautiful boy, who was so wonderful and so special in so many ways, who triggered something inside of me that as a child I learned to hate about myself, received words that made him feel hated by his own father. Not my best moment. Which brings me to your true self versus your strategic self explained. At FRDL, there was a session led by Jason Gaddis, founder of the Relationship School, that deeply impacted me. In Jason's session, we learned the difference between your true self versus your strategic self and how it affects how you approach every important relationship in your life, including with your parents, your children, your partner, and yourself. Now, for context, your true self is how you show up in the world in service to yourself, putting your needs above the needs of other people in any given relationship in your life. Your strategic self is how you show up in service to the other person in the relationship, by subordinating your own needs in favor of the needs of the other person. In every interaction, in every relationship, we have 2 choices. Choice A, listen to the voice of our true self, Or choice B, listen to the voice of our strategic self. Now here's the thing. There is no choice C. And therein lies the great challenge of the human dilemma. Because with choice A, we risk losing the relationship with the other person in our life if we act on what our true self needs. But with choice B, and by subordinating our own needs, we risk losing ourselves. At an early age, we learn that to be safe, to be accepted, to be loved by the important relationships that we have, like our parents and the other important people who matter to us in our life, we need to show up as our strategic self. And in the process, we learn to bury the parts of our true self that aren't accepted. We learn to hide that part of us from the world. And quietly, we learn to hate that part of ourselves that we learn to hide. Which brings us to the 4 archetypes. 4 ways our strategic self copes with our unmet needs as children. In a separate session at FRDL, led by the incredible Christina Hassler, we learned about the 4 archetypal response patterns that we tend to fall into as a means of coping with our unmet needs. These behavior patterns represent who we learn to become as children and later as adults. It's our way of learning how to receive the unmet needs we had growing up from our parents and especially our mothers. The 4 archetypal response patterns are as follows. Number 1, the lone wolf, i.e. hyper independent. We say things like, I don't need you or anyone. I can do it on my own. Number 2, the fighter, i.e. hyper rebellious. We say things like, I'm going to do the opposite of what you say and want just to piss you off. Number 3, the knight in shining armor, i.e. the hyper people pleaser. Look at what I've done for you. Please love me. And number 4, the achiever, i.e. hyper performer. Look at what I've accomplished. Do you love me now? Now, we often express aspects of multiple patterns, but there's almost always a dominant pattern that we fall into. For me, that pattern is the achiever. I learned at a young age that with enough achievement, I could be loved. In fact, I followed a textbook playbook of hyperachievement. Good grades, Ivy League school, start a business, achieve financial success. Along the way, I learned to bury the other parts of me that weren't compatible with this playbook. The playful parts, the silly parts, the parts I learned to hide, the parts I learned to hate, the parts that weren't worthy of love. Can you relate? For me, I learned growing up that you can't be lazy, ever, because lazy people are losers. Fast forward to today, and even as someone who has spent considerable time and effort, quote unquote, doing the work, when I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed, or like what I'm doing for my business or my family or my contribution to humanity is not enough, like I felt on the day shortly before leaving for the event, I will slip into hateful self-talk directed at that wounded 11-year-old boy inside of me, which when my son was exhibiting behavior incompatible with my so-called achiever playbook for receiving love, showed up in the form of those hurtful words directed at him. Now, the painful irony is that I hear my own internal voice showing up right now in this moment. There's so much more I want to share with you to help you reflect on your own life, to help you make sense of how to apply this. Like, for example, how the ask method forces you to subordinate the needs that you have in your life to deliver the needs of your market. Not what you want, but what they want. And how you can run the risk of losing yourself in the process if you don't let your true self have a say, i.e. listen to the contrarian voice of your heart. But as I've written this, and as I share this with you here today, after an incredibly long day and an emotionally exhausting week, it's currently 2:37 a.m. in the morning right now. And with the time and very little energy I have left remaining before needing to actually get some sleep, I will need to wrap things up here for today. But not before leaving you with one last thought. At FRDL, the session that may have had the biggest impact on me was one delivered by the incredibly gifted McKernan, someone whose work I've gotten to know a bit over the past year and whom I'm looking forward to getting to know a lot more over the next year. In one of Philip's sessions, he delivered a line that's been rattling in my head ever since he shared it. When you're busy seeking the validation of the few, you cannot impact the many. Pause. I'll share that again. When you're busy seeking the validation of the few, you cannot impact the many. I share that line with you in the context of today's episode because if you find yourself slipping into negative self-talk, if you feel the presence of that wounded inner child surfacing, if you hear the voice of that person in your life from whom you're still seeking love, quietly whispering in your ear, I want to invite you to remind yourself of those words to live by. When you're busy seeking the validation of the few, you cannot impact the many. Something to consider as you think about the work that you feel called to pursue. Okay, I'll leave you with that for now. Have a great rest of your weekend. Remember to hug the ones you love. And until next week, I wish you all my best.